Okay, we're live stream. Got it.
Okay, what's that?
Shall we?
Yes. Okay, I think we should.
Okay, all right, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, depends on where you're calling from or joining this this session this evening. We want to just start by thanking everybody for making out the time to join tonight's session. I just want to put a little context to today's seminar. This is a long and much awaited session, because the original idea for this session was birthed by our very own Madam President, Madam Monica, during initial planning of the reunion, the joint reunion last year. We unfortunately could not take the session at the time due to some schedule conflict and some other circumstances, but we're really excited about the opportunity that has availed itself for us to be able to get together and get the benefits of hearing specialized views and thoughts from our experts on today's session. So we also want to acknowledge Madam President from the XJOR community and pretty much everyone that has joined this session, as well as specially thank the panelists. So Dr. Josephine and Dr. Ogo, we want to thank you so much. This was 1 year overdue, but we're glad that you still could make out time from your busy schedules to to grace this event and share your thoughts with us on this topic. We initially started off with a theme which was more about coping skills with the spate of gun violence and general violence and traumatic events. That was the theme for last year, but we just chose to modify the context this time just to open it up for more participation and engagement from other people, so that the Canadian folks and those that are joining in from Nigeria that might not be predisposed to things like this can also connect to the topic in question. So hence the revised version of mental health and then just coping with trauma and stress. But we still would touch on topics around how we cope with traumatic events, either gun violence, domestic violence, sexual violence, whatever that is. Hopefully we can open that up and get some insight from the specialized personalities that we have in this call. We will start off with a presentation that our very own Dr. Josephine will lead, and then afterwards we'll open up with questions and answers. So during the course of the presentation, if you have any thoughts or any clarifications that you need, please feel free to drop comments or the questions on the chat section, and then we'll take it after the presentation. I just would employ everyone to go on mute and just allow the presenter and panelists, that's both doctors, to stay unmuted and can lead us through the session. And then afterwards, we could unmute the general public and have that conversation. But before we get started, I just want to introduce our both panelists. I'll start off with Dr. Josephine Mokonogo. That's the ex-JAW from the 89th set extraction. Josephine Mokonogo, MD, is a psychiatrist who is a board certified in general psychiatry as well as consultation liaison psychiatry. She completed a residency at SUNY Downstate in Brooklyn and fellowship in psychosomatic medicine, psycho-oncology at the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York City. She's an active member of the Academy of Consultation Liaison Psychiatry. Clinical interest includes women's mental health, psycho-oncology, infertility, and transplant psychiatry. She's very passionate about the education of trainees and peers and has developed a course series for non-psychiatric clinicians called the Psychiatry Toolbox to teach basic psychiatric diagnostic and therapeutic interventions for patients in the community. We want to thank you, Dr. Josephine, for making the time to, to participate in today's session, and looking forward to, an insightful discussion.
Thank you.
And then to introduce our very own Dr. Ogo Chukwujama from the 88 sets extraction. Dr. Chukujama is a highly experienced psychiatrist with over 14 years of experience in the field. He currently serves as the medical director and deputy chief provincial psychiatrist, as well as an ex-JAM. In these roles, he provides exceptional leadership and expertise in psychiatric care. Dr. Chukujama has gained extensive experience working with both inpatient and outpatient services, as well as psychosocial rehabilitation and intellectual disability services in Ireland and in Canada. Since moving to Canada, Dr. Chukujama has gained broad experience working with different agencies and service providers in the province, providing services to acute and psychosocial rehabilitation psychiatric patients for both Serkik Mental Health Center as well as the Inner Lake Eastern Regional Health Authority. He has provided care traveling to First Nations communities in northern Manitoba, as well as to patients from Nunavut admitted to SMHC. He provides consultation expertise to community living disability services in Winnipeg, as well as to the Mobile Crisis Service and the Crisis Stabilization Unit in the Inner Lake Eastern Regional Health Authority. Dr. Chukujama served as the past chairman of the Medical Advisory Committee of SMHC and is a current member of the Provincial Psychiatric Leadership Council. He's a lecturer with the Department of Psychiatry, Max Rady College of Medicine, University of Manitoba. He's also a member of the Canadian College of Health Leaders, Canadian Psychiatric Association, Canadian Medical Association, and Manitoba Psychiatric Association. Dr. Chukujama received his MD from the College of Medicine, University of Nigeria, and his psychiatry residency training in Ireland. He holds a diploma in tropical medicine, a diploma in clinical psychiatry, both from Ireland, and a master's degree in psychiatry with a distinction from Cardiff University in Great Britain. He also has certification in repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation from Maastricht University in the Netherlands. The special interest areas are in intellectual disability and neuromodulation treatments from psychiatric illnesses. In his spare time, he enjoys bike riding and amateur video gaming. He also enjoys traveling and mentoring the next generation. That is, we welcome you, Dr. Ogo. Very inspiring bios from both of you. Struggling to get some of the names right, but we thank you for making the time to participate in today's event, and we're looking forward to insightful conversations on a topic that that we relate to or our friends and family can relate to. With that being said, I think we'll kick this off with Dr. Josephine Sharon walking us through the presentation.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. These presentations that are on Zoom are not face-to-face are somewhat harder, I think, to focus. So I came up with a brief PowerPoint, just very brief, and I think it shouldn't take more than 10, 15 minutes, as sort of an introduction and maybe a starting point for conversation with some resources at the end. So let's start. Again, I know we will talk about, the specifics of coping with gun violence, police violence, domestic violence, and other things in our discussion. But I wanted to talk a little bit about coping with trauma and stress in general. So what is this? So basically, what is stress? I think we all know what stress is when we feel it, but what is it really? It's basically a response from the body in response to stimuli, in response to any adverse physical, mental, or emotional demands. With any demand, adrenaline is produced, and its purpose is to stimulate us to fight or flight. It's produced as a response to stress. And it can be useful or it can be hindering depending on what it is, what it's for. And the fight or flight response, if you think about it, evolutionary, when people lived in the jungle and in caves, it was meant to help you when you were in danger so you would know what to do and how to save yourself. But sometimes when we have stress or anxiety, what we notice is that our fight or flight response is evoked, and it's not necessarily in keeping with the situation. So we're stressed, and our body is thinking things are one way, and it actually doesn't end up well for us because the situation doesn't warrant that level of stress. That's what we call anxiety, really. So is all stress bad? Well, no. In general, when you think about it, and I would have liked to have a nice video of that curve. We call it the Gaussian curve. So Low levels to moderate levels of stress actually improve performance. For example, if you have an exam coming up, as the exam approaches, you're still not so stressed, it's a little bit, and as the exam gets closer, you feel your blood pumping, you feel your thinking to be sharper, your reflexes are sharper, and you start to perform well and do better, because we all need a little bit of stress to improve our performance. If stress is too little consistently, it may result in boredom and immotivation. However, too much stress on its own causes unproductive levels of anxiety. So like in everything, we need the level of stress in our lives to be just right. But repeated exposure to high stress levels can cause a post-traumatic stress response or traumatic stress response. And well, what kind of stressors? What are stressors? Really, it's anything. It could be any situation, any activity, even relationships that can cause trauma to your physical, mental, or emotional self. Anything can be a stressor. It's really about what it does to you and how it makes you feel. And what might be stressful for one person may not be for the other, and vice versa. So a lot of these expectations that we have of ourselves, that conversely, okay, I shouldn't be stressed by this, or I really shouldn't respond in this way, I shouldn't be scared of this, they are not necessarily helpful in a way, because what it tends to do is to make us feel bad about ourselves. Well, why am I not doing this? Why can't I? And that paradoxically causes even more stress. So stressors can come from anything. We are all aware, finances, work, children, illness, responsibilities, deadlines at work, deadlines at home, pressures, change, relocation. Virtually, all of us here are immigrants. We can all recall how stressful that was. Even for those who might have had more supports than they expected, it was still stressful. So all these things can combine, and we all react to them in different ways based on our genetic makeup and, of course, the size of the stress. I like to use the bucket of stress theory. So if you think about it, we all come with a bucket. The size of the bucket is determined by genetics, right? So we all come with a bucket that can contain a certain amount of stress. We have nothing to do with the size of the bucket. That's just genetic lottery. Now, so some people, their buckets are so small because, again, not through no fault of theirs, just genetics, that even the day-to-day stressors of life will cause the bucket to overflow and they can have symptoms. But no matter how large your bucket is, theoretically, there could be an amount of stress that would make that bucket to overflow. So it's an interplay between our genetics and our specific environmental circumstances. I hate it when the slide does this. I do not know how to fix this, sorry. So when we're stressed, what happens? Well, physical effects, weight gain, weight loss, hair loss, that's a big one. Hair going gray also sometimes. Heart palpitations, that's when we can actually feel our heartbeat. So imagine, after you've gone for a run, you can feel your heart beating, but that happens at rest. That's what we call a heart palpitation. Blood pressure increases. Those are all physical things that can happen when we're stressed. Emotional responses to stress, anxiety is a very common one. Mood swings, irritability is also another common one. And I think often, sometimes those may be the symptoms that could be a bit gendered. Quite often women may report anxiety or depression. Men more often, not all, but more often tend to report irritability and anger. And I think that that's just socialization, honestly. Unhealthy coping strategies, emotional eating, or avoiding food, both of them, alcohol, drugs, shopping, retail therapy, gambling, any one of those could be negative responses to stress. So how do we manage stress really? Well, stress relieving strategies, and they probably seem kind of hokey to some people, and I admit that. they seem, especially, someone tells you, well, if you feel stressful, just breathe. Well, is it going to make your stress go away? No, it's not, but it does work. And how does it work is, again, when we think about the fight or flight response, it's necessary in some instances, but sometimes, especially when people have anxiety or what we call anxiety disorders, it's you have the fight or flight response to a situation that doesn't really warrant it. And for people who especially have panic attacks, and I don't know if anyone here has had a panic attack, but people describe it, it is very powerful because it comes out of nowhere. You are walking around, minding your own business, and all of a sudden, boom, you feel like the room is spinning, you feel like you're dying, you feel like your chest is, your heart is bursting out of your chest. You don't know if you're having a heart attack, your fingers are tingling, it's terrible. And then it goes away. And the thing is, sometimes people don't really know what brought it about, why it came when it did, and when it's going to happen again. So that brings up a lot of fear and anxiety, because if you have no idea when this thing is just going to come upon you, sometimes people are so worried that they can't leave their houses without we call it a safety person or someone with them. And eventually some people are scared to leave their houses at all because they don't want to be embarrassed. They don't know. Sometimes people end up in the hospital because they think, they may be having a heart attack, and no, it's a panic attack. So one thing that we've learned about panic is that it feels like it's coming out of the blue, but it actually doesn't. What happens is, we have the conscious level and then we have the unconscious level. So there are triggers in our environment that we notice, and we may not notice on a conscious level, but stressors, things that happen, and it feeds into our unconscious, and then it starts to build from there. And we don't notice it until it pushes up into our conscious level, and that's the panic attack. So one of these things that these strategies can help us to do is that they can help us to be more aware of what's going on with us, so that when we're in a situation and we realize, oh my goodness, you know what, I'm starting to feel tense and my heart is beating. So you take a pause and you look around, okay, something here is stressing me out and I may not know what it is, but at this point, I'm going to start to calm my body down, and it does work. You do the deep breathing, sometimes people do some stretching exercises and some other things. And if you can identify the stressor, then you can, move away from it or exit out of that or whatever. And eventually people are able to manage these anxiety symptoms by training their body. So it seems weird and, kind of crunchy, but it does work. And that's the basis by which it works. It puts us more in tune with our bodies and helps us to gain more control, because a big part of anxiety and panic is loss of control. Okay, so breathing techniques, that's huge. That's a major thing. I mean, when we think about it, if you're getting anxious, what happens? You start to breathe faster, and you may not even notice it, but as you breathe faster, your heart is beating faster. Again, your body is preparing to fight for its life or to run away. But you're sitting in your office and you're having a conversation with your boss, and neither one of those would be an appropriate reaction, really. So what do? You just try and slow down your breathing. And by doing that, you are not blowing off as much carbon dioxide, and your oxygen carbon dioxide levels will normalize. And because again, when you have too little carbon dioxide and too much oxygen, it can cause you to feel anxious. Guided imagery, that's just, you think about, you have like a thought or not a happy place or a happy memory or something that you already know that you can call on and can help you to, so you think about happy memories, you think about that, and it helps you to not focus on what's going on. Physical exercise, workout routines, and yoga also really good. You may need time to do that. Again, breathing, I love, because you can do it anywhere and no one has to know. You can sit down, you can do it anywhere. Meditation, I think a lot of people are talking about meditation and mindfulness now. And it is useful. It works. Again, these are things that are all about putting yourself back in touch and back in control with your body and the way your body interacts with the environment. And it's not necessarily sitting down cross-legged and doing, you can do that if you want, but it could also be turning off your computer, putting your phone away, going outside to walk, not necessarily to look at anything, but just to be. You walk, you notice the sun, you notice, going around, breathing looking around without any agenda and just reflecting and let your thoughts fall where they may. Counseling. I mean, I'm a psychiatrist, so I definitely have to talk about that. If, I always like to tell people that if I were in charge of the world, every adult would have to go through therapy for at least 2 years in their young adulthood. I think it is that helpful. No, it's not necessarily lying on a couch talking about your mother. Even, that's what you want to do, that's fine. But I think that we all come into this world and we have, whether we know it or not, preconceived ideas about ourselves, about the way the world works, about lots of things based on our, temperament, our backgrounds. And we're interacting with other people. And a lot of times we don't really realize the driving force behind what we do. And talk therapy can help to bring those up. In addition, talk therapy can also help you to work through stuff that you're going through, because it's different from talking with a friend or a family member where there is an expectation of reciprocity. When you're talking with a therapist, the therapist's only job is to be there for you. The therapist's only job is to be there as a neutral reflector to help you with what's going on. And really what's going on in your own life, you don't have to care about that. They are there to help you and help you walk through whatever you're going through to the best of their ability. Life coaching is also an option. I think life coaching is therapy light. Quite often, people will call it therapy if you're in the same state, and life coaching if you're in a different state because of licensing issues. Either one of them is fine. So yes, please go outside and touch grass. I want to talk a little bit about, social media. So it is quite common for a lot of us to use social media as rest, as distraction, as, it's great to connect, but social media is not a restful thing. Especially when you're dealing with trauma, we are talking, especially when there's something going on in the news, maybe there was a mass shooting or an incident of police violence or something. The thing about social media is, you're scrolling through your feed and you see some things that are nice, and you could literally see something that makes you laugh 1 minute and then something that makes you cry the next. You can't really, unless you carefully curate what you're looking at, it's very hard to protect yourself because it's just a dumping ground for anyone. I remember, in the year 2020, that was a tough year for virtually everyone in the world. And there was EndSARS going on in Nigeria. There was police violence going on here. Then we heard about someone that was assaulted and killed in a church. And I remember, because I also quite often would use social media as a distraction, but it was like, I'm trying to deal with this. Okay, I'll leave US feed and go to Nigerian feed, and then they're talking about Lekki toll gate. Okay, I'll leave that and go here. And then they're talking about this and talking about that. And I just felt like I was bombarded by all sorts of trauma, and I had to abandon it entirely. So it's, if you are in a stressful situation, it's good to be mindful of where you go and how you engage, because it may not necessarily be the release that you're looking for, unless you have a carefully curated input that is like just, staring at puppies or whatever, that is guaranteed to have no conflict. But sometimes you're even sometimes reading what someone writes that you don't agree with can make your heart rate to start to rise. I can make, sometimes I read some stuff and I'm like, who said that? Do they really believe that? And then my hackles are rising. And it's someone that I really have no contact with in real life. It's just Twitter. So we want to be careful about that. So other helpful hints, rest time. As I said, rest time is essential. We are, in North America, quite often there seems to be the go-getter culture habit, or, you have your job and 2 side gigs or whatever. All the rich guys, they talk about how all the rich men reportedly wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and they do all sorts of things. Rest time is essential. Our brain needs it. That is when our brain recharges. That is when our brain lays down. That's how we remember things. If you don't sleep, your hippocampus is not going to lay down memories, and you're going to forget things. You actually need rest. Rest that is not necessarily doing chores. Rest that is just time to be. And you also need to, it's not just sleep. Rest and sleep are different. Sleep is good and is essential, and you need to get enough time for sleep. But also, you need to have time when you are awake, but resting. That's also important. Avoid caffeine after certain times of the night, and avoid alcohol, especially if you're starting to use that as a way to numb emotions, feelings. Setting reasonable goals. When you're going through something stressful, okay, the idea that, and I think culturally we come from a culture that there's a lot of, well, this is what you should do, and this is how you should be. And really, who said? I mean, that's a cultural belief. But if this is where you are, then that is where you are. Now you can have goals for yourself, and okay, this is where I want to be. And the fact that you're not there, you can use that as okay, so I'm not there, what can I do to get myself there? But the negative idea, I'm not there and I should be there and I have to be there, and why am I not there? If you're not using that as a tool to push you forward, it's really of no use. It's not helpful. It is not productive. In general, after you've experienced trauma, try not to make impulsive major life decisions. Now, I know that we can have a defining event in our lives that can say, okay, this happened, and then I realized that I could no longer stay here, I could no longer be in this relationship, I needed to be here or there. And that's okay if you give it thought. But in general, when you make decisions, you want to be running towards something and not running away from something. So major life decisions, I know a lot of people have that defining event, but you also need to give it some thought and not be impulsive. And when you think about it, sit with it for a while. That's the way you want to go. Fine. And then, change, that's the only constant thing in life, really. And sometimes we need to grieve. There are things that happen that we have no control over. And we can control our environment, we can control some things as much as possible. But there are some things that happen, and we may need to grieve and sort of pick up the pieces and move on. Then exercise, walks. I'm a big believer in walking, stretching, meditation. I think our parents' generation, often they had like chairs by the window or on the veranda. Or I remember going to my hometown, and quite a few people, like, they would have like something, just sitting outside. And I mean, they had something, because being there in nature and just, no phones, no entertainment, even whether you have electricity or not, but just being in nature in the quiet, that helps. That helps with thoughts. And of course, keeping yourself healthy, walks, stretching, again, that mind-body connection, it's essential. So let's not forget that. Set boundaries, not just for other people, but also for yourself. So, it could be as simple as, when you're on social media, every time I read what this person writes, my heart just starts beating. So I'm just going to go ahead and block them or mute them. And I don't need that. Demands on yourself, demands from other people, and the demands that you set also. You want to always sit back and check, is this something that is useful and worthwhile? And is this the best use of my time? So the benefits of stress management, when we do all these things, not just mentally, but physically, we get better. Our attitude gets more positive. We feel more hopeful, happier. We're able to focus and achieve, again, when our stress level is just right, not too high, not too low. This is just some brain stuff that I thought would be interesting. So generally, we have alpha waves, you have beta waves, you also have delta waves, but that's when you're sleeping, so don't worry about that. And beta waves are really good for task-oriented activities. When your brain fires higher. The alpha waves are the slower waves, and that's actually when we learn the best. So when you're stressed, it's hard to learn. Sometimes you need to relax. You need to take a break and you need to do things. The beta waves are for when your adrenaline is pumping and everything is well. So if you want to look up stuff by Skip Downing, it has some of that stuff. So some apps here that I thought would be useful. This first one, the CBTI. So this is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, and it's a free app by the Veterans Association here in the US. This is what I recommend to patients. It's actually very good, and it's a stepwise thing. Basically, cognitive behavioral therapy, if we were to sort of talk about what I talked about here about managing anxiety and stress. So you have a thought that makes you anxious. It deals with both the thinking parts, so how you challenge the thoughts, and it also deals with the behavioral parts and how you adjust your body so that you don't have those, to dampen down those anxiety reactions. And this is, I think more than any medication, CBTI is really good for trouble sleeping. Guided meditation, progressive muscle relaxation as well. There are multiple apps that you can find on any app store. Some have music, some don't. Pick your choice. I think it's good. The Calm app, the Mindfulness app, and Omvana. I think that those could all be useful depending on what you're looking for. For me, I will say the core of everything is deep breathing. Okay. And when you think about it, when you're anxious, just try, trust me, please. Slow down your breathing, make a conscious effort to slow down your breathing. And you can even count. Each breath should last for 6 to 8 seconds. So normally when we're anxious, we're like, no, that's going to blow off CO2 and make you paradoxically more anxious. What you want to do is, breathe like babies who are sleeping. You breathe in for like 4 seconds, you hold it, and then you breathe out for another 4 to 6 seconds. Each breath should last 6 to 8 seconds. And if you have trouble sleeping, if you have anxiety, first thing, if you can do this for 2 minutes, both morning and night, whether you feel anxious or not, both morning and night, just take 2 minutes out to do your deep breathing. It helps, because then when you're anxious, you'll be able to do it better. But if you only save it for when you're anxious, it's like learning how to drive on the freeway. That's not going to work. But if you're teaching yourself a skill, morning and night, you can master your breathing. That one step helps a lot. And you can do it anywhere and nobody needs to know. But it helps a lot to dampen down your anxiety, that physical response. So if I had one thing that I would like everybody to know, is that it's important to remember that the brain is part of the body. Okay, so we think about, different culturally, we have like brain, mind, heart, soul, spirit, whatever, emotions. This is just a pump. There are no emotions located here. Nothing, no feelings, nothing. This is just a pump. Everything, it's all up here. The brain is part of the body. And like every other part of the body, sometimes the brain gets tired and sometimes the brain gets sick because it's part of the body. It's not some weird thing somewhere else. So that's it. I'm off my soapbox now. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Dr. Josephine. I think that was very insightful, very educative as well. We appreciate the time you put into putting all of that together and educating us tonight. So we will open up for questions. So please feel free to either unmute yourself, turn on your video, ask your question, or you could type it in the chat section of this platform. Perhaps while we wait to get that, I will just make a quick comment. Actually a question. I feel like for the most part that we struggle with accepting mental health or stress as a topic. Some people just connect to it as maybe a sign of weakness or a sign of one being in an unhealthy state, that one doesn't have control or one is struggling to stay afloat. And then I also feel like sometimes people also attribute it to just the fact that there's a lot of people just use that term loosely in a sense. People don't come to work, mental health, so it's talking about mental health like a session like this, for instance, like typically our outputs or the participation is a lot, that we get a lot more people participating in our sessions. But mental health, I'm beginning to get that sense that, you know, people don't really want to spend so much time talking about it. My question is, does talking about it, does it help promote, you know, self-reflection or whether or not, or the state of our wellness or the state of our mental health? Or is it just still, you know, building on the narrative that by talking about it, people are just jumping on that bandwagon and taking the easy way out and blaming everything on mental health?
Maybe I'll take this one quickly. So I like the way you put the question, because it's a very valid question for our culture, right? So I think here in North America and also in Europe, they've done a wonderful job over the years through public health awareness and stuff to make it more obvious that the mental health discussion is very important. They know it's affecting everything, the economy, productivity, everything, right? So we are at that junction in time where we actually talk about mental health more than we've ever done in history. So 10 years ago, you have burnout in the office and you just want to check out. You didn't do that. You lost your job, or you put on so much stress on yourself that your productivity will be hindered going forward. We have the extra of our culture, being Nigerians, West Africans, we're go-getters. We have the way we were talked to by our family members. Oh, go pass this exam, go do this, go do that. We have all this external stress from our families, our society, and then we have the internal one that we create for ourselves as well. So this question essentially, I think, is towards everybody in this room, like talking about our mental health. Is it helpful? Is it healthy? The answer to that is a very simple one. Yes, it is. I think Josephine really touched on it very well when she gave the bucket as an example of our genetic, you know, makeup, what we're coming into this world with. We're all very, very different here. Some of us are better. The best example would be stuff like, say, being a public speaker. Some people they find it much easier to speak in public than others. Others would have a full-blown panic attack at the idea of talking publicly. But that doesn't mean that if I have the ability to talk to a room of about 17 people and a few other guys that are watching us streaming, it's nothing like if, say, I was put on the same stage as, say, Barack Obama addressing a crowd of 100,000. I will freak out. You know what I mean? So it's all about the buckets that we have, okay? And when you look at your mental health in general for what it is, like Josephine said, the brain is the organ that does everything else. We unfortunately ascribe a lot of stigma to losing our shit, for lack of a better word, okay? Whether it's depression, anxiety, or whatever. There's no shame in saying I had a heart attack, except physically you're not doing so well. There's no problem saying, oh, I have an ulcer in my stomach. I have a problem with my spleen or my whatever. As this organ or the other one has a problem. When it comes to the brain, which is the most important organ in the body, it makes all those other organs work. And once this organ in the brain checks out, nothing else works. So it's weird that the most interesting, the most important organ in the body is the one we feel the most stigma about. But that's because that's what gives us our personality, our ability to do everything. So it's kind of working both ways. We know it's important, but when it's not working, we're shamed more because we're not who we're meant to be. So yeah, so back to your question, should we ask the question, should we talk about our mental health? Hell yes, we should all the time. Should we panic too much about it? Not really. And again, I'd say we should be very grateful that we're in a generation and a time where we can do more about our mental health. We can seek more help. It is less shameful to talk about our mental health. It is less shameful to seek and receive the help. I don't know if that captures the question.
Absolutely, absolutely did. Thanks for your comment there. And still just a follow-up question to that is, still just addressing the issue of mental health and how different people, cope with stress and, life's events, just life in general. People cope with, trauma differently. I think I just want to tie it back to, like some of the gun violence that we talked about. And I think I want to just open up that opportunity to, to address how as individuals, or maybe even just supporting our family, our friends, how we can adapt or cope with the spate of this, gun violence in, where we live. I mean, we know the reality of, how things have been this year. I think this year has been one of the worst ones. Like, I think it was like February 23rd that I saw that there was like over 6,000 lives that have been lost because of gun violence in the US. 71 mass shootings so far. I mean, the closest it got home to me was like 2 weeks ago, the Michigan State University shooting, because I was in Michigan just a few days before that event. And so it's getting, just so insistent that, one has to, it begs for that conversation as to how can we help our friends or help our kids or help our family and loved ones on A, how to adapt, B, how to cope with the trauma, C, how to help others that might have been exposed to those levels of trauma cope with it.
So I'm sure Josephine will jump in to help me out here, but part of it is so trauma is exactly that, trauma, right? It means when we say trauma, you're thinking maybe when they conk you on the head in AFMS, that's trauma, that's physical trauma, right? But then psychological trauma is, when something really bad happens, unless you're a psychopath, you kind of, a part of you empathizes, you go like, well, for the grace of God, that could have been me. That's part of what generates that trauma, okay? And certain aspects of what we do can re-traumatize us or reduce the trauma. So for instance, like Josephine mentioned, social media, or how you allow the news to filter into you. If when we're treating medical students, when we're treating psychiatrists, we always tell them, listen, we have different things that cause trauma. You witnessing the trauma yourself, you being a victim, or you just being there or hearing about it. We've changed what we used to define what the trauma is, the reception is. So if, say, people like firefighters, they do a great job. They go to help somebody and they see somebody get burnt alive. That is a lot of trauma. That can give you, even though you're not the one that was burnt, you didn't receive this, you didn't touch anybody, but just seeing that, the trauma of seeing that over and over again, you can have PTSD. And I'm likening this to social media. We turn on our feeds and we're looking at what's happening in Nigeria. Maybe there was a shooting or a flogging or whatever, right? And you keep looking at this and you're wondering why you're so tense all the time. You find that things like that, re-traumatizing yourself, can keep worsening what you're going through. So you got to set boundaries. You got to say to yourself, you know what, this isn't helping me. If I wake up first thing when I'm checking out the news, oh, earthquake here, mass shooting there, mass shooting again, and then your feed starts to, the algorithm starts to push more like that towards you, well, it's just going to keep increasing your anxiety. So part of it is, we have to be informed in what's happening in the world, but you don't want to be re-traumatizing yourself much more than you should. Empirically, everybody says that the world is a much safer place than it is today. But the problem is that the news that sells is bad news. So all you see is bad news. And it makes you not want to leave your house, allow your kids to go climb a tree. It's informing your behavior because you're getting all this bombardment of bad news. But it doesn't mean that the world is that bad. So you might have to dial down on the amount of bad news you're getting. If you have apps, for instance, that give you feeds, well, maybe you should look at cutting it down a little. Social media is good. I love social media, but then I don't want to also go there and get traumatized. So I don't know if you want to add anything to what I've said, Josephine, with regards to how to tackle the difficulties of traumatizing and stuff, especially with regards to the shooting you have done in the States.
I do agree with everything that you said. And, the issue of mass shooting, it's a tough one. It's a tough one because I think it's something that we realize living in this country that it could be anywhere. It could be anytime, right? So it's hard to talk about, well, is my anxiety real? Is my fight or flight response real when it theoretically could be life-threatening? And I would say at this point, number one, you have to, this is where boundaries come into play. Like Ogo said, you have to curate, what you listen to. We know there was a mass shooting, right? We know there was a mass shooting in Michigan, and we know how many people died. And I recognize that, part of it is curiosity. I just used to scrolling, but of what use, and there's the reflection of what use is it to me to continue to delve into this? And I know that sometimes philosophically, there's this need to, especially with police violence, to bear witness to what happened. And I understand that, but the first thing is you have to make sure that you are able to take that. Not everybody has to bear witness all the time. So first, okay, this is information that I need to know, and I may need to use that information to help me with decisions that I need to make. But basically, we have a 24-hour news cycle, like you never escape it. It's not like when we're in Nigeria that basically, I remember, we wait for the TV to come on at 4 o'clock. And, that was really it. I'll wait for the news to come out at network news at 9 o'clock or local news at whenever it was. And that was what we used to get on newspapers. So you could also just be without being bombarded. But now you have to make a deliberate effort to avoid these things. So sometimes, it might be worth thinking about, like, how do I filter out news that's, seeing it once, seeing it 10 times in the space of 5 minutes, those are very different things. And yes, those, even though you were not there, those can cause traumatic stress simply by witnessing it. So I certainly do agree. And, as much as possible, channel what the energy you have into something. Well, what can I do about it? Because a big part of it is helplessness, right? You are sitting around, you're waiting. So, well, what can I do? And according to your philosophy, you act.
Thank you so much. I think that clearly, provides some objective tools that one could use, especially, just curating what you expose yourself to. I think that these days you turn in multiple channels, just the bad news thrives and it sells, and then it's just over the airwaves, and you're always just predisposed to those kind of things. So we have to, I think, make conscious effort to, to guard our what we expose our minds to, and just take a healthy dose of this thing. So I appreciate the input there. Before I add other questions to it, there are some questions from the chat platform here. From Ogake, so what can be done about the PTSD that we mostly hide from attending EFMS? It goes both ways, from EFMS and EFGMS. So I'll be interested in getting both views of the panelists on that question.
Well, okay, so I can take AFMS, and I think I've addressed this on 2 different Zoom meetings that we had. So there's no shame in it. AFMS was a bit rough, to put it mildly, and I remember during this question, the first time, I think it was my classmates who were having a Zoom meeting, was on mental health, and I asked the question, hey guys, how many of you here have this stupid dream where even though you're an adult now, however, you feel like you're back in AFMS, you're trying to dodge from some senior, you're going to Black Tank, you're going to some other hostels, you're in the bush for a couple of hours, and the feelings you have in the dream is exactly the same as when you were a crab, and everybody's hands went up, so, and it's not for the lack of trying to forget it, but it's just what it is, memories sometimes, and especially when they're very when what happened was very, very raw, it sticks. And so you remember exactly what happened. You remember how you felt when it was happening. You sometimes remember the smell of what was going on, right? And it's there. So do we have PTSD? It's neither here nor there. PTSD can last for a long time or for a very short time. It can go with medication or trauma-focused talking therapy, or it goes on its own. However, there's always the lingering thing because, again, we're not mathematical formulas, we're not computers, we're biological beings. So there'll always be a trace of something. That's how memory works, you know? And sometimes, even though it's mostly, you mostly put a lid on it, but because the brain has got so many wiring that goes, they're adjacent to each other, a memory comes by and it triggers something, you might remember stuff, you know? I think it's worse for men than women because, unfortunately, culturally, we're meant to be tough. We don't talk things out. I've always said that the secret weapon women have is don't have a good cry. Don't talk about it. Men, we measure ourselves by how much you can put a lid on your shit, which, forgive my French, by the way, but I'm really working out for my kids. But you find that we identify ourselves. We have this warrior culture. We're Nigerians. We're Nigerian. They carry last, and we put more pressure on ourselves as men. I should know better. I'm a psychiatrist. I work. This is what I do for a living. That's what pays my bills. But I still don't do what I should do all the time. I still try and put on a brave face no matter how bad my life is. I do not talk to my friends as much as I should. I do not share as much as I should. I know better. I do these things. But women, even without knowledge of psychiatry, they know already unconsciously that they should share stuff, they should have a cry, and you feel better. You're walking through it. Do you know what I mean? So this is me talking for the ex-JAM AFMS issue of PTSD style stuff. We can do better. Having this chat in the first place helps. I know I've gotten in touch with certain chaps that were ahead of me in school that did some weird stuff. And when they were doing it, they were just being themselves. They didn't think, there's no big deal on what they were doing, right? But it affected me. So talking about it helped. In the same way, when I was a senior, I'm sure there's stuff that for me was, it was a typical day. But for somebody else, I ruined this day and he remembers it. And if he calls me and goes like, you were a real asshole then, you know, and I'll apologize. It goes a long way. You know what I mean? So for AFMS, these are the kind of things that would help, I think. Perhaps Josephine, I never wear skirts. It might take on the junior air women's side of things.
Okay. I think it's pretty much the same. And when you think about what happened realistically, we're adults now. I went into JS1 when I was 10 years old, right? Most of us were young. The age range is like 9. Some people were younger, they were 9, maybe 9, maybe even 8, I'm not sure. Up until 15, 16, 17. I was the third set, so I didn't really have to deal with people that were that much older. I had just 2 sets ahead of me. So of course that cannot be compared to people who had multiple seniors. And then you put a 10-year-old in a situation where a 16-year-old who is definitely physically bigger, but whose frontal lobe has not quite matured and is still pretty impulsive, and you give them total power over that 10-year-old, it's not a good plan, really. It's really not. And yes, it was difficult because it was. And there's really no shame in being traumatized by it because it was a traumatizing situation. Think about it. Some of us have kids now. You look at your 10-year-old, your 11-year-old, and would you expect them to go through what you went through and not have a response? That's not realistic. So we're in that situation, and then you had a response. And again, you couldn't even have a response because you'd be punished for having one. And those things tend to stick. Again, those are our formative years. So different people would have different reactions to it. And I believe that your emotion itself is valid. Everybody's entitled to their emotions. If you are sad about it, you are sad about it. And there's no need to question, oh, I shouldn't. Again, there's that should, right? I shouldn't, how can I, when, if you are sad, you're sad. And I think we all do. Nigerian culture, we don't necessarily think about that, but we do need to sit with our emotions a little bit and walk through them. You can't, emotions don't disappear. You can repress them and stuff them down and then pour alcohol and food and other things on top. Or you can go and punch a punching bag or whatever. But if you don't walk through those emotions, they're still there and they come out in ways that you may not expect. So, and again, the classical nightmare, that's the way, Freud will talk about our dreams. That's a big way that are unconscious. So all these memories that we've repressed for so long, they often come out in dreams. So it still affects you. It's very difficult, but it's not a weakness. And I would say at this point, process it the way you can. I will say that, in some of the Facebook groups or WhatsApp groups, there are some people that when their name comes up, I'll say something. And, you can't hurt me anymore. I'm grown now. I was a child then, but I'm not a child anymore. So at the end of the day, you were the one that was bullying a child, right? So yes, you had power over me then. That's fine. You did what you did, but you can't do it anymore. And I will say my piece. And
thank you very much for both responses. I don't know if both of you noticed that any of the past seniors or even ourselves on this call, once we're called upon as perhaps one of those wicked seniors back in the day, we all claim to be the nicest people. And I'm talking to one of the panelists that knows himself on this. So, but again, there's a comment from Oga Chaos, they took away my cry in the FMS. I don't know how to cry anymore. So some of you are still dealing with some of the aftermath of that experience. But a quick follow-up before we take Ogajide's question is, can an argument be made that that experience, that training, going through those trying periods in our lives at a very young age, can an argument be made that that helped build resilience in most of us? Personally, I feel like having gone through that experience, there's not a lot that life is throwing at me that I don't think that I have the tools to be able to to process and move forward. But how do you reconcile that with perhaps the PTSD that we're talking about in question?
So that's a very good question. And the truth is, it depends. It depends on the person, right? Like Josephine said earlier on, you have your set of genetic bucket that you come into the world with, right? So the word I use, I love that analogy, Josephine, but I'm going to start using that. I usually just go with the word resilience, because we all have different levels of resilience, but it is a bucket of, if yours is overflowing, well, that's your cutoff points, right? So if you use a bucket, think of the bucket as being elastic, because resilience can be elastic as well. Did our experiences improve our ability to take on more stress? Yes, but then also yes and no. If we go with the yes, that every time you look at your school motto, strive to excel, for instance, you just keep pushing unconsciously because that's part of you. There's the other part of it that you say to yourself as a Niger guy, which I never see before, right? So it doesn't matter what they throw at you, especially those of us that are out here, we're immigrants. This is a stressful place. Half of the time we're trying to learn how to put our left foot in front of heel toe. There's a lot we learn about this place that we still don't know. There's things that we will never know compared to our kids because they grew up here. We didn't go to primary school here. We didn't go to secondary school here. Well, most of us anyway. There are some people that are better than the rest of us. But it's such a stressful environment that if you didn't have your resilience stretched a bit more by your experiences in AFMS, you wouldn't be as maybe bold, maybe as friendly, take chances, right? I wouldn't be saying to myself, I could just say, hey, I'm a doctor, let me just go to see patients and keep my head down and make some money. Or I could say, do you know what, I think I have a lot to offer to this place. I'm just going to do a bit more, right? And if you don't believe for a second that all your experiences in some way positively pushed you towards who you are, then that's okay. But I think the reality is that a lot of who we are today is because of that. But as well, there are some hindrances because of that. And they're not that many, which is good. You know, like sometimes knowing when to say, you know, I'm just going to give up. I can't fix the world. I can't fix everybody. Do you know what I mean? That push that we got from our experiences, for me, it's mostly the positives I look at, but there are a few negatives, but they're not disabling. So I think that'll be the best way I can take that question for you. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Thank you for that response. I'll get Ogajide to take his question. Ogajide, please go ahead.
First of all, good evening, Dr. Oga. I was in Blue Squadron. I think I served some of your job.
Okay.
But it made me a stronger man. Also, good evening, Dr. Josephine. Thank you so much for all the information so far. So the question I have is, I know many of us on the call were not professionals like you guys, but in the event where we have, say, a family or friend who we feel needs some kind of mental help, or who might need assistance or something, are there any basic steps or basic tips that you can share with us to take before we say, okay, I can't help this person and this person needs professional help? Like, are there any steps we can take that takes us to a point and we say, okay, this is beyond my common sense, or, you know, beyond what I can offer, and now I have to refer this person to a psychologist or something? Are there any tips that we can implement? Like, we who are outside that situation, I can look at that person and say, okay, I don't think this is normal. I mean, I know we have to listen to people, we have to try and understand people and put ourselves in their shoes, but any tips that we can, just apply before saying, okay, this person needs professional help?
Okay, so first of all, thanks for the question. And I do remember you, Jide, and my God, I love the voice now. It's so much, it's so much different than mine now. So, and I hope I wasn't too mean and I wasn't too much of an asshole when I was a
No.
No, I'm just joking. But yeah, the question is a very valid question. It's easier for Josephine and I to know where the cutoff is, like, hey, this is pathological, this is normal, right? If I understand your question properly, what you're asking is, what are the signs or symptoms that you see in a family member that would tell us that, hey, do you know what, maybe we should be looking for professional help in this individual? And if that's the question, then I would say to you that psychiatry is like the book on the DSM is about this thick, right? And there are a lot of symptoms to watch out for, which we couldn't exhaust in this place. And I'm not sure that would be the best way to answer the question. I think what would make sense is to say, do you know what, anything I can't talk through, say it's my kid or my cousin or my brother, anything that, number one, doesn't make any sense to me, a non-psychiatrist in front of me, I should seek help. Anything that would impair this individual, whether it's your child, your mom, your brother, from their normal day-to-day function, is getting to a pathological level, and I should do something about it. Anything that you think that is increasing the dangerousness of your environment, whether it's in the workplace or at home, you think perhaps this person is not eating anymore, or they're so overwhelmed, they're not going to work anymore, or they are so transfixed by something, or their thinking is a bit off. So like we say, village people, and they're just not right. We all have that inbuilt thing that tells us that, hey, do you know what, this person needs some help. But sometimes because of, again, stigma, or you don't want to seem like you're being overly anxious about the person, we kind of try and mind our business. But with a family member, you don't have the luxury of trying to mind your business. You want to intervene early enough. So the person isn't sleeping. If I'm trying to be, if I want to hone down on certain symptoms that are general for most diagnoses, if the person isn't sleeping well, if the person is either acting or expressing a lot of anxiety, if the person is not keen to get to their usual stuff that gives them happiness, if the person played guitars and enjoyed that before and they're not playing it anymore, but they played video games before, something we refer to as hedonic activities, if they're not engaging in their usual pleasurable activities, it's a bit of a warning as well. If the person is eating too much or too little, right, it tells you something is going off as well. If the person is vocalizing a lot of anxiety, or the person is somebody that was always bubbly is suddenly negative. And then finally, if the person is expressing beliefs that don't make any sense to you, when you look at the person's age and cultural beliefs and background, if suddenly the person starts to think people are out to get him or kill him, or what we refer to as delusions, a belief in something that is not based in reality, that one shouts at you, right? So if the person is expressing any of these things, well, then you say to yourself, do you know what? Perhaps this is beyond my talking sense to this person, okay, correct in head. No, seek help. And the fastest way, I don't know how it works in the States, but your family doctor or ER, or if you have, a psychiatrist straight, it might not need a psychiatrist. It might just be something that needs a therapist to get involved, right? But yeah, once, to use common parlance, once they pass your power, don't be hesitant to say, hey, do you know what? Let's see what we can do about this, and then seek help. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, Josephine.
I agree. I think that, we typically know our loved ones and we know when to reach out. So, you can reach out to the person and express your willingness to listen and to help. But, people are, and it's interesting because, when you tell somebody that you need help or you need a psychiatrist in our culture, it's an insult. So how do you now turn that to an expression of love or caring? But your loved one, and you know how to adjust that. But when you do have these symptoms that Ogo described, that's when you should seek help sooner rather than later. And they can always, talk to you, but often depending on what the person is going through, as I said, a relationship with a therapist is different from a friend. With a friend, there's, the expectations of judgment and reciprocity that they may not be able to deal with at that time. So they may need someone else.
Yeah. And I think talking with the person as well, like in that engagement, you have to have a sense of what this thing is in the first place, as much as possible. Communication, talk, get a sense of it so you can describe it to the next person. Do you know what I mean? And stigma is a very big thing in our culture. I can't stop talking about stigma in our culture, I have a first cousin actually, who is in a psychiatric ward in Lagos right now. And she's a high achiever. She and her husband, they've got like 3 estates that they built up. So you can imagine when you're that level in our society and you have a bipolar affective disorder, right? And she was admitted, say, about 9 days ago. And I'm going to, after having this chat with you guys, I'm going to have the distinct displeasure of trying to explain to her what's going on with her, why she has to be on her meds, why she has to chill out and just accept help, right? And is it going to be an easy discussion? Absolutely not. She has a PhD. She knows what she's talking about, but she's unwell right now. Do you know what I mean? So communication is everything as well. Get a sense of what it is. Talk with the person so you can communicate better to somebody else. I find will be very helpful as well.
Well, thanks for both comments. I think maybe we could also just share some ways that we can communicate and extract this information from people. Because I've been in situations where family members or even And I know a family member that was going through something like that would not really own up or accept to, what he was dealing with. But I mean, obviously it was something that we knew around. He didn't want help. He felt like he was, everything was okay, but clearly he wasn't able to, keep with his regular life expectations. Like he wouldn't go to work, he wouldn't go to school, he wouldn't do anything. So I guess like tips that one could use will be helpful. That being said, there's a follow-up question from the chat from Dr. Kids. You can take this question yourself, or Kingsley. You can unmute yourself and ask this question.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for the presentation, and I'm learning so much from you, both of you. So my question is, how do you navigate like a clinical psychologist / counselor and a psychiatrist when one has, a psychological related thing?
That's an excellent question. So I think the best way to answer this is to describe what we do differently, right? So a psychiatrist is an MD, he's a medical doctor that studied medicine and then did a residency in psychiatry. And he knows a lot of what the psychologist knows, but he knows his medicine as well. The other difference is that he's the drug dealer amongst two of them, so we can write prescriptions and give medications, while the psychologist can't do that. Now, a psychologist is similar to the psychiatrist in what he knows, but they do a bit more in certain areas than we do. So for instance, they might do more of therapies, different types of therapies as one conjoint training. And the other thing that they could do more would be things like risk assessments, if they work in the forensics, or they do all the different tests that we check with psychiatry that tell us where somebody is. Very importantly, they don't prescribe medications, at least not in Canada. I don't know if they do it in the States. I know some nurses do prescribe in the States. So if it's something that is easily a psychological problem and you meet your family doctor or you're in the ER, sometimes they might refer straight to psychologists because they think it's something that we can do, go through therapy sessions to fix this. However, most times the port of call would be through the psychiatrist, who would then, if it's something that doesn't need a psychiatrist's input, it doesn't need medication, it doesn't need that level of input into what's happening with this patient, we'll refer on to the psychologist very quickly. However, certain dangerous presentations almost always go to psychiatrists all the time. Patient trying to kill himself or trying to kill somebody else, trying to starve himself. Do you know what I mean? Is so out of touch with reality that they need medication immediately, or perhaps they are so unable to function in their day-to-day, get to a job, and they need an admission very quickly. They'll need to see a psychiatrist. A lot of times, an admission to psychiatric hospital equates seeing a psychiatrist, but we very quickly move people on if we think that they need more, they need help from a psychologist much more than anything from ourselves. I think that would be the best way to describe it. You don't have to, it's not up to you to make that determination who you're sending to. It's best if you just go through a port of call, right? So I think what I'm saying is to absolve yourself of making that decision on who to go to. The person will find what's a scientist level. The person will go to who he's meant to go to. It's just a matter of just highlighting, hey, I've got a person needs this problem. Tell me who to see.
Gotcha. Thank you. I think that's very clear. And then my second question is, how do you navigate? Because patients who come or people who come to you with religious faith, faith beliefs, and how do you navigate that whole, especially in our culture?
Okay, so the first thing I'll say is I respect our culture a lot. I'm a Christian. I believe in God. But I also believe, unfortunately, that our culture, we've been very poor for a very long time. And when you don't have enough medical services to meet the demands of the population, nature abhors the vacuum. In that vacuum, religion takes over, right? And I'm very, very careful to run away from the arguments of religion as the opium of the masses and all that. Religion is good for us. It's good for mental health. If you're a spiritual person, as different from religious, it's really helpful, I find. Our culture is such that certain things don't make any sense when you live in the Western world for a while. But that doesn't change the fact that it provides comforts to the people that practice it. So if you want to think of it as very bizarre, think of voodoo in the West Indies. To Nigerians, whether you're Christian or Muslim, that's kind of different for us. It's different, right? So it's a bit icky. So we don't understand why they believe what they believe. But for us, we believe strongly what we do. So when we go to religion, but we're going to dangerous levels, I always say, please consider a psychiatrist immediately. If we start having beliefs that don't make any sense, somebody will say, where I come from, I don't know if it's popular, but Odeshi, somebody goes like, oh, they're going to put stuff in you, and then you can go deal with the police and they shoot you and you'll bounce off. That's just crazy thinking. But it's our culture. Do you know what I mean? So when a family member starts to exhibit a religiosity beyond the norm, and it's difficult to know what the norm is because it's a moving target in our culture, depending on our background and families. When it's beyond that, then you'd say, well, perhaps it makes, I just somebody wrote in, go test Odeshi. So it makes sense to seek help and to say to the person, do you know what, I've always known you, but this your beliefs are a bit different. If somebody tells anybody in this forum that he believes they can walk on water, well, you're going to say immediately, you're crazy. I'm going to look for help for you. But that's very extreme. But it's blurring those lines between the belief and what is going beyond the belief. That's where it gets a bit tricky for our culture. It's easier for a non-Nigerian to go in the same way we go for looking at voodoo and say, nah, something wrong with this picture. Difficult for us, but we call it right most times. Even if we don't say it, we think it. Like, you're a bit beyond the pale, and there's something wrong here. So that's how I look at it. We shouldn't be afraid to challenge it. We shouldn't be afraid to call it out when we see it and go, do you know what, this practice doesn't make any sense, or this person needs some little help. And let's go past the stigma and just go seek help.
Thank you so much, sir. I'm really sorry, I don't want to hog the mic, but I have one last question for you.
Before you continue, I did want to add some things to that. So I think that, Nigeria, we have we're very religious as a country, and we're also very superstitious. And there's a big thing about, the spiritual, the supernatural to us that can seem, a little bit odd. And we tend to spiritualize things a lot. So sometimes, as August said, you want to know like what is accepted within their own general family, religion, culture, where they attend, where they worship. And usually if it's from, mental illness, you'll find that it's more to the fringe, like even amongst most of the people, it's different, or you'll find that they have actually recently changed. They have left here to go somewhere else. They have all these traits that even people around them find to be quite odd. I tell people a lot, in Nigeria, I remember when I was in UCH in psychiatry rotation, it was all demons. Like they were all possessed. The way they explained it, it's all demons. And, that's fine to an extent. That's how you see it. And, I'm a Christian. And if you read the Bible, there's demon, they say, that word demon was used to describe a lot of things, including epilepsy. Right? So because that's how they understood it. But the way they describe it, in fact, that's a classical description of generalized tonic-clonic epilepsy that's described in the Bible as a demon. They have a loud cry, they fall into fire or into water, they shake, and then they're still. That is classic. So the thing about it is, how does that seem in comparison with other people? And then you also sit with them that, okay, so it's a demon. How do you think this demon came to be? You know, if that's the language you want to use, I'm fine with it. And again, this is what I do. So if you're a physician, you can do that, not, but like, how do you think this demon came to be? Is it possible that it could be due to something going on in your body? Because some people do believe that demons cause all kinds of sickness, not just mental illness, all kinds. So do you think that it could be XYZ? And even their response to that will give you some clues as to whether this is actually a spiritual belief or it's a psychotic illness.
Yeah. Just to add to that a bit more. So again, it goes back to that statement I said earlier on. So in the absence of information, nature abhors a vacuum. We need to have some explanation for what's happening. Sometimes we have personal growth and you just know, okay, do you know what? This is what I was thinking. So I will use myself as an example. I don't know how many people here experience when you're trying to wake up but you can't get up, right? Sleep paralysis, we call it. As a student in secondary school, everybody's talking about, oh my goodness, man, Beelzebub and, the demon sitting on your chest and all that, right? And, as part of growing up, I was one of those chaps that experienced that. So I might be sleeping, I'm awake, my brain is awake, but it hasn't engaged with my body. I'm having sleep paralysis, okay? And I remember the last time I had it, a major one, I think it was in SS2, I think. And I was hearing my friends talking next in the bed next door, and I'm trying to get up and I can't. And the terror of going, oh my God, man, okay, which of these demons is still on my chest? And, and then you're going, but this is irrational thinking, but this is what I believe, right? So, and then I sit through lectures and they're talking about sleep paralysis and I'm going like, I feel like an idiot. But why am I? It was the belief system of where I came from, right? And then the next time I had that, I had nothing like the panic. I had nothing like I was like, okay, I'm just waiting for the reconnection to, they don't plug the brain well, and then when I got up. Do you know what I mean? So even within ourselves as that personal growth, because we do have some beliefs that we had previously, and then down the line, we're going, yeah, this doesn't make any sense. So there's growth, there's environment. Yeah, it's just, if it's strange beyond what is around you, you kind of know, and you just push for that.
Yeah. So my last question is, and this is to both of you. Do you think that being a Nigerian, an immigrant, because a lot of these psychological mental health issues, have some sort of cultural basis and needs better understanding from, say, an immigrant. So do you think that your management decisions, based on your knowledge as a Nigerian, as an immigrant, versus another psychiatrist that is, Canadian born or US born, and all the experiences here, do you think that there are some differences in management decisions based on this prior knowledge, in addition to your training?
Absolutely. In psychiatry, we have something we call cultural psychiatry, because we appreciate the fact that there are differences due to our culture for the kind of illnesses that we have. There are, depending on where you are from this planet, we do have presentations different based on our environment, cultural experiences, family experiences. I think there was one for Nigeria. What's it called? Brain fag, for instance, is a very typical Nigerian experience. If you go to the textbook of psychiatry and you're looking at transcultural psychiatry, brain fag would be origins, Nigeria. Happens when the person has exams, he's driving himself crazy, he wants to squeeze a crazy amount of information into his brain in a very short time, and you go for the exam and the person just has almost a fugue state. Sorry, what that means is you just blank out, right? So there are so many other ones. Joe will remember quite a few of them. That's the ones you have in South Korea. There's a few from Indonesia and all that. So that answers the question with regards to cultural representations for psychiatry. To the second part of your question, which was, is there any advantage in, say, somebody from the same culture treating? Absolutely. Because you're my culture, I understand what you're saying. I understand the way you're describing yourself. A typical Nigerian, back home wouldn't say I have irritability, for instance. They'll go like I have internal heat. That doesn't make any sense to a white person. You know what I mean? Or if somebody is saying, that became a demon, and is thinking about killing, they wouldn't say I want to kill that baby, but you kind of start suspecting that those might be thoughts that this lady is having due to postnatal depression or psychosis, right? So there are always advantages in people that look like you, talk like you, had similar experiences like you, giving you help because they understand what you're going through. They understand your language better and they can conceptualize more what you're trying to, because being in front of you, this is a cry for help, right? And it's not just in psychiatry. I know, for example, I've been bugging some of the Nigerian doctors here to join the disciplinary committee of the college here. Because when doctors are pulled in front of the college, oh, you did something wrong. And the doctor was doing the best he could. He might have said some things, but the meaning was lost in translation. So if you have a Nigerian sitting on that disciplinary committee and they'd go, well, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but what he meant was X, Y, Z. Then they're not just circling the wagon around this doctor and trying to punish him. They now have an insight into the way he's thinking. So if that's working on the outside, you can imagine how much stronger it is when you have somebody from your culture who is giving you help or listening to you. So yes, absolutely. The answer to that is absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
I agree with Ogo. It's really important as much as possible to have doctors that look like the population they treat, because that's how you get understanding. Quite often they may not understand. I remember I was, I think it was late last year, I was in a hospital and they said, oh, can you check out this Nigerian patient for us? She doesn't speak English and I couldn't tell from her name. I knew she was from South, but I couldn't quite tell where she was from. And I went in and this woman actually speaks English, but it's accented. And as far as they were concerned, she wasn't speaking English. So I told them, no, she speaks English fine. She speaks English perfectly. She just has an accent. So you need to slow down and actually listen to her talk. It's also about the way you interact with patients. I think that sometimes people from Nigeria expect a more directive approach, a more instructive approach from doctors that they may not necessarily get. So sometimes when a doctor is giving them a choice here, they are like, well, I came to you, so why are you now asking me to choose? So understanding, that aspect of culture and some other things, it changes how you interact with the patients. And the commonalities in background, in language and context are very, very important.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much for those comments. A follow-up question is the reverse of it. Are there downsides to, being a doctor to the Nigerian community, or being familiar with the patient base? For one, my doctor, if I go after booking an appointment with him and I get to the OR or the room, whatever, like we spend the first 20 minutes talking about sports, about elections, about Nigerian situation, and then I'm like, we should be having this over a bottle or something. I'm in the hospital I'm in the clinic for a reason, but that familiarity, we talk about so many other, and then we just have like 10 minutes and it just feels like we're rushing through my problem itself. Like, are there downsides in your experience dealing with members of the Nigerian community?
I'm going to share a story as an answer to your question. When I was an intern, we had a patient who was a Nigerian patient, and we're giving him a lumbar puncture, which is basically, they're putting a needle through your spine to take some fluid and send to the lab because they thought he might have meningitis or multiple sclerosis or something. And he was a Nigerian doctor, a Nigerian. And I was like, okay, typically someone will stay by the patient and sort of coach them through it because it can be painful and uncomfortable. And they put the needle in and the guy started to complain. And I honestly did not even know when. I just started to berate him. Okay. Now, so you won't disgrace me in front of these Oyibo people. this small needle, now why you they shout so? And he said, oh, I'm sorry. And I later realized that I wouldn't have done that to somebody who was not Nigerian. I would have shown them empathy because it's a needle and it hurt. And I basically shamed him for it. So that was it. So yes, it can be a disadvantage. You know, sometimes they may take you for granted. They may give you special treatment and they may do both at the same time. They may not take you so seriously. Oh, you are pregnant, you have headache. Doesn't every other person have headache? But if you go to a different doctor, they'll take you more seriously for some symptoms. So it's a double-edged sword, really.
Ogake said I was malingering. That's what it was.
The other part to it as well would be negative for the Nigerian doctor as well, because like Joe said, yeah, we can miss stuff because we think we're dealing with Nigerian, and it can be a double-edged sword. The other thing as well is this it's a minor complaint for the doctor for the patient's problem, but the way it works out here, you know, you're billed by the minute or by the hour or by, you know, so, and if you're working for a trust or a group, there's an expectation that you're going to bring in X amount, or maybe a personal expectation that you're going to bring X amounts within a short time. And when it's a Nigerian, well, if I was able to give a white man 15 minutes in and out, right? With a Nigerian, the expectation in my head is going to be 25 minutes already. And, you know, it's okay. It's your brother or your sister. But then if it starts to accumulate, it starts to bite into your bottom line, right? And nobody, I don't care what you do for a living, but if you have somebody that works with you and they're going like, hey, you're not meeting your billing expectations, then it starts to affect your behavior as well. So again, it's double-edged sword, like Josephine said, but for the most part, it's a good encounter.
So there's a question from Madam Monica that, for the both of you, like, did your military school experience direct your career path? I mean, choosing the psychiatry field, like, did AFMS experience or AFGMS experience, did they play any factor to that decision?
Do you want to go first, Joe?
I would say no. I don't think so. I don't know why I decided to be a psychiatrist, but it was really the only thing I wanted to do. And I thought about other things, you know, I went through a lot of specialties, but I just kept coming back to it, despite the fact that, yeah, you know, people don't really think that it's a worthwhile profession. But it just attracted me. I don't think it was school. I think it just was.
I think I'm the same. Nothing about AFMS pushed me towards psychiatry. And in my class, we're just 3 or 4 doctors or so. Then after my medical degree, I was like Joe, I wanted to go to ONG, obstetrics and gynecology. But then I'm very lazy. I'm thinking about standing for how many hours, and babies never came. They always came middle of the night and early morning, and it just wasn't for me. So I quickly had to ask myself questions like, okay, so what fits my personality? And I'd always been a people's person, you know. And then one of my posting in psychiatry, I think, was instrumental as well, because I found it very fascinating. To be honest, I felt we knew everything about the rest of the body, the heart, the kidney, the lungs, everything. And then the brain, which is the engine house of everything, we know more about the ocean and the moon than we know about the brain. So, and then it helped knowing that most of the research money was going into mental health. So you kind of knew that you'd always feed. So I think that was what pushed me towards it. Nothing to do with AFMS. Jide's hand is up, I think, for a while.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, both doctors. So this question I'm about to ask has nothing to do with and I'm using myself as an example. Has nothing to do with maybe trying to be a man or, you know, display that I went to military school or something. But sometimes, most times, and I think it's just my nature, in certain situations, for example, as like Nigerians, you know, we find ourselves in certain situations where something happens. And the typical response, for example, is like, hey, yekpa, or where you see people rolling on the floor and things like that. But by nature, I'm the type who doesn't respond in such ways. You know, I've been in environments where there's an incident, something happens, and maybe everyone is crying, but I find out that I'm not reacting the way people would generally react. You know, and jokingly, you know, some of my friends in the past have made it appear as if, okay, this guy is cold-hearted. You know, for example, sometimes if there's an incident somewhere in the US and you look at the environment, you see everybody's reacting a certain way, then there's this one particular guy that is just maybe quiet or maybe, and you know, and if you now tell people to analyze that situation, they say, maybe that's the guy that shot, that did this, that did that. So the question is, if one is that way, is it in any way related to mental health? Or is it okay for one to just be that way? And like I said, I'm using myself as an example, but it's just my nature. And for me, like in certain situations whereby people might break down, might cry, I tend to react differently. Like if I'm really down, I find myself cleaning a lot. That's when I'm looking for something in the house to clean, wash the car, clean the garage, do this, do that. So is that in any way related to the negative sides of mental health, or, you know? I hope my question is clear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think the first, let me jump in with a very quick answer. There's nothing wrong with you. It is, you answer some of the question yourself. This is who you are. What it essentially means is that perhaps you have different coping mechanisms than the rest of us. I wish I could clean when I'm upset like you, and then I won't have to pay so much for it, you know, but that's a coping mechanism. But then again, and the other part of the question that you asked is, you were like, you're sure it's not because you're trying to be a man or AFMS, and that's why you're the way you are. But I guess the question comes back to which came first, the chicken or the egg? I don't know what you were like if I met you in AFMS, but then you have to admit that AFMS did hone some skills in you, or harden some things about you, or increase your tolerance for distress for certain things compared to when you walked in. When you walked into AFMS, you might have cried easily with one slap or not. Definitely by the time you're in 40, you can receive 10 slaps and you're booming. So you have to see that growth, negative growth, if I'll put it that way. So there's nothing wrong with the way you accept or the way you tolerate distress. I just think it's partly nature and partly nurture. But that's what you're born with. The nurture part is your experiences that reinforce who you are. And in your case, you have different coping mechanisms to deal with stuff. Rather than cry, you'd rather go clean. That's great. I wish I could do that. Others would smoke or drink. So that would be my approach as an answer for that.
Yeah. So the other thing I would add is, well, how do you feel when you're doing that?
Yes.
When you have a traumatic event or something happens, how do you feel with your reactions? Do you feel better having cleaned or reflected quietly? Because I think that it is, it's a combination of nature and nurture, whether you yell and scream or you go and sit somewhere and seethe or talk to yourself or clean or, attack the dirt and fight the dirt in the ground. If that's what you want to do you feel relieved after that, or do you still feel tense? Do you feel, do the emotions still come up, or are you okay? And that's what determines whether it's right or not.
So Dr. Joe, I'll say 99% of the time, I feel okay, I feel better. And just like Dr. August said, some people will smoke, some will drink, some will listen to loud music. But it tends to, it helps. It puts me in a better situation. And most of the time when I'm doing that, let's say it's cleaning, for example, excuse me, I find out that it gives me the opportunity to reflect, to think, to make better choices.
So then that's what works for you. Because if everybody's running and shouting and rolling on the floor, then who's going to be the one looking out for everyone? Like we need all kinds of people and different kinds of reactions to make a community.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Ogake say your house will be sparkling, it'll be a sparkling house. So we're gonna wrap this up within the next few minutes. We'll just take last set of questions. I have a question around physical health.
I was gonna, just a quick suggestion. It really helps if everybody open up their cameras, because then it feels like a better chat.
Better chat, yeah.
People can just talk better rather than Yeah, if you can. If you don't want to, that's fine, but it helps.
Let's see your faces, your beautiful and handsome faces, please. All right. So one question on physical health, on restlessness, sleep, pain, food. The question is, there are recent studies that the amount of sleep or the lack of it is directly linked to dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Can you share your thoughts on this topic and share what is the right amount of sleep for adults, and if there are ways that folks that are juggling, work, school, family activities can still map out enough time to get the right amount of sleep? That's the first. I'll just ask the both of them so you could pick and choose. The second is, how does food and eating habits help to maintain like healthy energy levels and reduce stress? Some people have a go-to snack to deal with stress, like your favorite ice cream or pastries, etc. I believe it's called stress eating. How do you shift that mentally to manage your stress levels?
Okay, maybe I should take the sleep one, and you could take the diet one. Yeah, okay. So when it comes to sleep, there's the straightforward one: get 8 hours of sleep a day. That really helps. Let's start with looking at what sleep is. Sleep is essentially you booting down the computer, right? And you're allowing it to get enough rest, get enough blood supply. If you're in the gym and you're lifting weights, after a while you're going to feel pain in your muscles because there's a buildup of lactic acid in your muscles, right? The brain is the same. It needs some plumbing, right? So when we're asleep, it helps to clean out infections, chemicals that are a bit too much. I should use more hormones that shouldn't be there, replenish the cells that are there as well. Things like dreaming even improve things better, right? So when you have a nice dream, well, then it's helping the hippocampus part of the brain, the part of the brain that is here that helps with memory. In the presentation, Joe had mentioned alpha waves, beta waves, right? So these are electrical signals that are generated by the brain, but you need a very healthy brain to do these things, okay? So the sleep helps to rejuvenate, refresh, and puts the brain back to where it should be. You mentioned the association between sleep and, say, things like Alzheimer's disease or whatever, maybe Parkinson's disease. Well, so it's kind of like damage. If you don't treat the brain right, if you're living on 2 hours of sleep a day, drinking the coffee to stay awake when you shouldn't, well, then you don't have as much neuronal recovery as you should. And if you are predisposed to things like Alzheimer's disease, which is laying down of plaques in the brain that shouldn't be there, well, if you're allowed to heal better, well, perhaps you won't have as many plaques or white matter assault, or perhaps, if you're not sleeping, your blood pressure is high. So sometimes that doesn't help as well because you start having all these punctate lesions in the brain. So sleep is really, really important. If you're predisposed to any of these dementia-like illnesses, well, a lack of sleep will worsen it. If you are doing anything in life, that needs your brain function to, none of us here is a laborer, we have to use our brains, right? So you just want to rest this machine so that it can better do what you want it to do the next day. 8 hours, doesn't really matter where the 8 hours is, but as long as you're trying to do it as much as you can for your work. Some people work at nighttime, so they want to sleep during the day, but get the 8 hours, and if you're reverting back to daytime shift or something, find that way to get your 8 hours back. If you get 10 hours, even better, but who gets that with kids and all, right? So that would be my approach to that answer.
Before I talk about food, I also wanted to talk a little bit about what we call sleep hygiene. And those are behaviors that sort of help to promote sleep. So, the thing is, you can't really control when you go to sleep. You can't. What you can control is when you wake up in the morning. So if you wake up at a regular time, the idea is that you can reset when you go to sleep. So that's one thing. Number two, you avoid caffeine, not just coffee, but caffeine containing beverages. You should give it at least 6 hours before your bedtime, to be honest. You avoid caffeine containing beverages. Number three, you don't stay in bed when you're awake. So you keep the bed for sleep only and sex. That's all. Anything else, you get out of bed to do it. That's all you do.
It is happy.
Number four.
I mean, you need to see Ogake's face as he lit up.
Well, everyone's paying attention now.
Magic
Number
word.
four, you avoid screens at night. You know, if you have trouble going to sleep, you don't scroll through your phone, don't scroll through your iPad, because the blue light actually signifies to your eyes that, oh, it's bright, maybe it's time to wake up, I shouldn't be sleeping, because those are the cues that we use to know when it's time to go to sleep. And you don't need the bed for sex. That's true. You can just leave the bed for sleep alone and do the rest on the floor. So those are, that's what we call sleep hygiene. And then if you can't sleep, turn on the lights, dim lights, get out of bed for a bit, maybe go and get some milk, listen to some music, read a book that's not interesting, and then try again. So those are all behaviors that can help you to promote sleep. So sometimes you have to wait. And deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation is a really good way to do it, because like if you have an app or you're listening to something on your phone that you're just lying in bed, like progressive muscle relaxation will tell you, okay, so lift up your fist, tense your fist, feel how it feels when it's tense. Now release it, now tense it again. Now raise your leg. Now, and if something like that is just droning in your ear over and over, might just ease you off naturally. So some of those apps in the slide would have some things. Now, food. Okay. So the thing about food is when you think about when we're babies, right? I remember when I had babies, and I had twins the first time, and both my mom and my mother-in-law and my mom's friends and everybody, once baby cries, we'll feed him. Once baby cries, I just feed him again. But I just feed him again. So the idea is that milk was not just for hunger, it was also for comfort and anything. It was like a cure-all. And on some level, we tend to carry that behavior with us. So often, and I do think that going to boarding school where we didn't eat for long stretches of time and we're hungry added to that. So, when you are hungry, you eat. Sometimes when you're bored, you eat. When you're upset, you eat, because it's almost like, it's like you're ingesting pleasure and warmth and comfort and all those things. And hence, stress eating. And then sometimes we tend to not make the best choices on what we eat, because not me. When I'm upset, I'm not going to eat broccoli. I'm going for ice cream or something like that, right? Because I want that instant dopamine hit. So again, being mindful of, okay, you schedule your meals, you schedule healthy meals. I feel like eating now. So am I really hungry? Am I bored? What's going on here? And taking a few extra minutes to reflect on how you feel and what the purpose of it is. Because, it's good to enjoy food. I like food and I enjoy food, but food or lack of food is not a moral thing. But it's also not, it can be pleasurable to eat, but that should not be our only source of pleasure. Food should not be our entertainment. Food should not necessarily be our comfort. We take some time to reflect before eating. And even if you've taken 2 bites, you can still put it away if needed. But that reflection, and sex, shopping, or any of these behaviors, again, why are you doing it? That reflection of why. Am I running towards something, or am I running away from something?
I think it's captured in remember this adage, do you live to eat or eat to live?
There's one of the coaches that I listen to, she has a podcast on weight loss, and her name is Katrina Ubell. And at one point she says, a good philosophy regarding food and emotional eating is your life should be exciting, Your food doesn't need to be exciting. It's a source of excitement for you. Your life you should get excitement from life, but your food should be just to eat, to satisfy hunger. I mean, I think food should be pleasurable too, but I get where she's coming from.
Yeah.
Point taken. Thank you so much for this comments. I think we'll wrap up because we're past the 6 o'clock mark.
Okay.
We're opening it up now for general questions, general comments for the next few minutes, and then we could shut the platform down. But before we do so, I just want to Ogaki, go ahead.
Sorry, thank you very much, first of all, but I just need a little bit of clarification. When you said, you're talking of the pleasures like food, but you were not clear. Can sex replace the entertainment since we can't do food?
Well, the thing about it, what's the purpose? Are you running away from something? Like, is sex has a lot of purposes, right?
No, I'm not having kids, so the only reason why I have sex is for entertainment.
Okay, entertainment.
For pleasure and for entertainment.
And I guess you and your partner will be able to determine, are you running away from something and using sex as a coping mechanism?
No, we know they run from anything.
And I'm not necessarily talking, physical, emotional, like, is it a coping mechanism for you?
No, I thought you said that instead of concentrating on food when you feel like, so this is where, this is exactly where I got confused, because now my partner can now start saying, hey, you are running from something. Then you now start denying me.
I think that's a negotiation between you and your partner, what they think you're running.
Because as you said now, they said, look, a psychiatrist has just said that you must be running from something. I don't run from anything. I just want to enjoy my remaining days.
Okay.
So what is the conclusion, please? What is the conclusion, please, before they come and shut the commercial?
Okay, you never get the conclusion already. Okay, Dr. Joey, over to you.
Again, it's for you to sit with your feelings and decide what the purpose of it is, right? Of whatever it is. Is it shopping? You shop because you need something, and sometimes you shop just because it makes you feel good, right? Same like alcohol, same like food, same like sex, right? Are you using it as a coping mechanism? Because some people do. And that's an honest conversation that you need to have with yourself, really.
Thank you.
Okay, that's special coping skills.
It might not be the answer is looking for.
Of course.
They said jump quick.
Ogake, let me interject here. It will lower your blood pressure, by the way.
Thank you very much.
This is the OBGYN, so it will lower your blood pressure.
Thank you very much. If you have me behind that, look, if the thing is lowering, if sleep and this other thing is lowering blood pressure, why is my own high? So maybe I'm running from.
So don't worry, keep having lots of it.
All right, thank you very much. That is a doctor, by the way, for the person where they are behind camera.
That's full license. Okay, well, I just want to use the opportunity again to, on behalf of the XJAM community and the XJAM community, and I'll give a moment to Madam Monica to also, make her comments here. I want to thank the both of you especially for, honoring us with this invitation. Oga, Dr. Ogo, we've called you a number of times and you've honored the invitation every time. We really appreciate your contributions to the association. We thank you for your selflessness and your contributions to take us, to support us even in mentally and giving us the tools that we can use to, combat our day-to-day life in general. And to Dr. Josephine, we also really want to thank you for making out the time from your very tight schedule to, honor our invitation and share your insight and your expert advice and, views on this very critical topic. So we thank the both of you and we appreciate your support in this session. Madam Monica, I don't know if you have any few words before we open the house for everybody else.
I mean, I don't really have much to say, just to say thank you again to both of you. Yeah, that's it. I mean, this topic was very personal to me, especially with the whole gun control thing. And I think that was the reason why I wanted us to do it. So I'm glad that, you know, it finally got done. Very informative. Yeah, thanks a lot. I mean, it was very much needed. So I hope when I pick up the phone and call any one of you, you'll be ready to tell me more. But anyway, thank you all for taking the time to start.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll open up the house. If you have any questions, any final comments before we shut this down, please feel free to go on.
Yvonne, you don't have any questions? You've hidden your face behind your camera.
Oga Goss, Arsenal is no longer causing any stress now. Wow. We're now floating Jesse. All these underground Arsenal fans have finally come out.
No. Arsenal is riding high. Arsenal is riding high. And to Dr. Ogo and Dr. Josephine, thank you so much. I've just been listening attentively to the session. Is really very, very educational. One thing I would like to say is my PTSD from AFMS is something that continues to reoccur. I have dreams all the time. I can say I probably have 4 or 5 dreams a year about AFMS, and it's incidentally it's actually morphed into things where when I have something going on in my life, maybe going after a business deal, or something, it will come in the form of a dream at AFMS. It's kind of very, very interesting. But I just thought I'd mention that. I don't know if other people have the same kind of experiences, but this has been very, very educational, and thank you so much for the time you took to prepare for this and to also lecture us on this. Thanks a lot.
I think that's interesting, the way you described your experience for the trauma, because in my discussions with chaps from school, it's kind of similar to what you're going through 5 to 8 times in a year, and increased incidents when there's a life stressor going on, like a business promotion or an interview coming up. Those are when the dreams. So you actually hit the nail on the head for the experiences for most people. Of course, there's always the chaps at the extremes of it, but I think that's kind of like the ballpark that I'm seeing. I wish I could do research on this, but you need a lot of people to tell you exactly.
Yeah. Mine is very, very frequent. And the dreams always end with like it always ends as if I'm trying to, we went out on an occasion, maybe on a vacation. I come back and I'm trying to find my room. I can't find it, or we go for a parade and it's time to, we're going for a POP parade, and then I can't find my uniform.
Yeah.
Oh my God, this is so crazy. I actually have such dreams like that, just like you just described, because I think I was the only one that used to dream like that before.
I'm serious.
I mean, like it always ended up with me being lost or confused, or
exactly.
It's that helplessness, that you feel, which is not in concert with where you are in your life today.
Exactly, completely, and
annoying.
It takes me right back to AFMS, and I will see familiar faces, my classmates. Okay, familiar faces, not people that are dead or anything. Familiar faces, my classmates, and they come in there in different kinds of metaphors, and and at the end of the day, it's like, while I'm trying to find my way, trying to get back to the parade ground, trying to, coming back from the holidays, or something just happened, and I'm always short.
Ogagos, in my village, they'll say those are the people who are doing you. So avoid them.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I do have to go. My babysitter is leaving, so I have to go.
Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Congratulations, Mama twins. Yeah, twins.
Joseph.
And another one after that. But yeah.
Oh,
Wow.
2 sets of twins?
Much respect.
Oh no, 1 set of twins. I have 2 6-year-olds and a 4-year-old.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. It was really lovely seeing all the faces. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. So where Dr. Ogo? Why is it so? Let me tell you 2 things. First of all, why do I have breaking transmission in my sleep? So I this is very constant. I get up, I wake up 3, 4, 5 hours into my sleep. I have to be up for 2 hours before I can sleep again. But when the sleep comes again, I have to sleep. Why? Why do I keep having that breaking transmission, I call it?
Well, this
is that an okay? Sorry? Is that an okay thing, or is it something to be
as long as you're getting enough sleep in the night, right? It can be annoying if you're waking up in between. I guess the question you would ask is, so as we get older, we need less sleep anyway, right? For men, it could be something stupid like as it doesn't really matter what we want, but our prostate gets a bit inflexible as we get older. So you will wake up at night to go pee, right? So going back to sleep, what does that mean for you? Maybe you come across as a very deep thinker and your mind starts to wander. Do you know what I mean? So maybe you're pondering the universe doing this. You're counting too much money. I don't have no idea, but it's normal as long as you get enough sleep. If it's broken up, that's just what makes you different from the next person. I find it very easy to go back to sleep immediately, but yeah, people are just different.
Okay.
But it's not pathological. No.
Okay. The other one actually is an experience of AFMS that now I would say I am not superstitious. I usually just don't believe all those.
Nigeria.
No. All right. Let me say over time, it's eroded. Yeah. No. That actually it's a fair question, because at the point in time I was very, in quote, spiritual. Everything was spirit. These days is more like, please, police, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but there's an experience that me and one other classmate of mine experienced in AFMS, and we had our 40-year reunion, July last year. Interestingly, he's also a psychiatrist in the UK, so I expect that he should be able to explain these things better. We sneaked out. We're coming back to jump the fence. We always pass through this. There was a burial ground. I don't know if he was there when.
I remember.
I know it very well. I know that part.
Very much.
Yeah. So, it's up. It's kind of slopey, right? When you're coming back, you're climbing. And so me and him were coming back, and he was talking. And then I saw something, but I will not say what I saw because I wasn't ready to turn around and start running back because we're, close to school. I was hoping that he didn't see it. He stammers a little, or used to stammer in AFM, and he was like, oh boy, can you see? So before he finished, I basically shut him down. Come on, will you stop that nonsense? Well, so then I started talking because I wanted to keep talking. I was talking absolute nonsense, but I just wanted to keep the talk flowing so that we didn't turn around and run. It was afterwards that when we got to the fence, I was like, what did you see? And it looks like we saw the same thing, a bed sheet. It felt like a sheet that was floating up. Yeah. It was in front of us and it was floating. And 40 years after, we still remember the incident. And I was like, okay, so what was that? He said he still doesn't understand. Please give me something logical apart from what's on my mind.
I have no idea what you saw, man. I don't know.
I mean, okay, since it was two observers,
yes,
it was
then a visual hallucination is out because
exactly.
2 people saw it.
Yes,
is Willy that.
But since it was at night,
yes,
it may have been somebody wearing a white.
Yes. So what happened is that as we got closer, somebody else jumped the fence. Actually, the person who jumped the fence maybe doesn't remember now. It was Kola Rashid in Albata. He jumped the fence. So we asked him, Did you see anything? He said, no, there's nothing. That he just, so he jumped the fence. He was going to town. We're coming back. So in short, the person who jumped right after did not see what we had just seen. It's physically does not and logically it still does not make sense till date. I usually don't like to talk about it so that they don't go and commit me.
Hey, you guys probably
suspect.
saw something, but you guys didn't want to look at it because you wanted to get back to school, right? So then whatever it is, maybe it was a sheet, and then he fell on the floor. He didn't see it, right? But then, you know what? This world is deep and wide, and science doesn't explain every single thing. And I don't pretend to assume that science explains everything, you know? So, yeah, something that doesn't make any sense. Okay. We get on an airplane. Your physics teaches you know how heavy that plane is. You get on it based on the faith that it's going to lift the floor, but you can't try and lift one tire. But that thing gets up there and you're comfortable. If you were born 100 years ago and you saw a plane and they told you to get on that plane, you didn't do physics, and you were not hearing planes all your life, nothing will make you get on that plane, right? So what you saw, I don't know. Is there a plane beyond what we know? Maybe, I don't know. I watched Spider-Man and the multiverse like everybody else. I don't know what this is. Do you know what I mean? But two people saw something. The third guy didn't see something. I don't doubt you guys saw something, but I have no idea what you saw. So,
all right. I guess I will just, it will be between me and him.
Somebody was
Well,
saying.
must I say that when you say, do you know what I mean? It sounds so nice. So keep saying it. Do you know what I mean?
Is that me?
Yeah, you. When you say that, it sounds very nice.
Thank you. I've been trying to
Monica, show your face. Monica, show your face. Maybe not say no be AI they talk, because you know they usually talk like that.
Oh my gosh.
My wife would laugh over this one because I've been working hard to get rid of that rubbish from UK nonsense.
But it would be a very interesting study to do, to compare like two boarding schools, one kind of Ajeboish and then
We already have the study.
FMS.
Or rather, actually, oh God, that experiment, you said you wanted to do some research, but you don't know if you have enough subjects. A lot of people will actually volunteer if you.
No, the funding too, obviously. You have to.
But yeah, then you'll have to get a statistician to go through the numbers, and because it's amazing, you can get lots of data, but what are you going to do with that data, right? And then you can get data, but you want to ask the right question. So, but it would be something I would so love to do because, yeah, I'd love to answer that question.
Actually,
and I mean, there are so many complications too, because after FMS, people have gone through other things,
other stuff.
They have to tease out a lot of the, like the co-founders and
that have compounded on top. So
actually, the thing is that if you start talking about it that you want to do it, you might find a lot of volunteers that will also offer their expertise in that area. Yeah. So let's say you're looking for a statistician, you'll be pleasantly surprised that some ex-jam does something in that and might be also interested in helping out in that.
I feel like
because these dreams, right?
The statistician go be ChatGPT. That one is easy. You just tell them what you need and then you pull out everything for you.
ChatGPT can do everything.
You got to study and just to prepare a protocol and then put the study in place and then we can run it through ChatGPT and give you all the numbers for you.
So you'll be pleasantly surprised that you have more than enough to contribute to the talent that you require to actually make the thing happen. Because as you said it, I also want to know. Right. And I have a feeling that the reason why most of your classmates also participated in raising their hand is that it's something they would like to know.
That is true. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. One time. Okay.
So please do it.
Meanwhile, since this is a psychiatry session, the ChatGPT, the OpenAI founder, Sam Altman, he invested in a company that is working on downloading the whole brain, all the memory in the brain to a cloud before you die.
Isn't that what Elon Musk is doing too?
No, he's doing his brain computer interface, things like
he's doing more of an interface, He's trying to make sure that, say you have a quadriplegia or something, you can look at stuff and it works, so you can wear an exoskeleton. Or you can, without touching a computer, move your mouse, your cursor. While this other chatbot is trying to do is capture, like we've always felt, if you guys are big in science fiction, the concept of capturing your consciousness and your personality, and then you can take off that sleeve and put it into a different body and continue. Like, is this something that could happen in the future? I always say science fiction is the first thing towards where we're headed in technology, right? And right now, most of our technology is silicon-based. So, but we know that if you use your DNA, it contains more information that you can pack into a silicon chip. So, are we going in that direction? I'd hope so. You know, I love. I can talk about this all day. It's just so interesting, you know.
Literally, in other words, he's working on eternal life.
Correct.
Yeah, that's what he's
Because
working on.
the person will get the body. The person will get the body, no get in your own life where you won't leave. Where so you won't go take over.
There's a Netflix show. I can't remember the name now. And it was 2 seasons of it. It was the most expensive show when it came out on Netflix. I can't remember the name. If I do, I'm going to throw it to you guys, but it was something similar. You know, you download your experience and memory up to the point where you do that, and you take it out and put it into the next sleeve. The body was referred to as a sleeve. And it's possible, you know. 300 years from now, whatever we're doing, this whole Zoom will look so primitive, right? So technology will always do that much forward. So I find that very interesting stuff.
So that, you're talking of when we can basically come out for our body, come meet for air. Now, witchcraft, then they call out for my village, but I think once the Weibo invent it to be able to call it something.
5 years from now, when we meet in the metaverse, this meeting will be in the metaverse, right?
Metaverse. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, it will be different. You know, it'll be very different then.
I have a question on like research and stuff like that. Like there's this I don't know, this paper on epigenetics and neuroplasticity. Like so that's like where you can alter the genes. Well, I think the concept they used was like, you know, how an infant, how the infant's genetic makeup or brain, whatever, is nurtured and transformed by the interaction between the mother and the infant.
Yeah.
And that there are current, you know, practices or science that, you know, you can use to alter the brain and somehow influence the genes to, you know, establish that mental health. Is that something that is mainstream? Is that something that's in practice? Is that something that in your line of work is still being explored?
So there's elements of that we borrow from the stuff that we do, and then some of it is fringe science, but not negative fringe science, right? So neuroplasticity by definition would mean that, say, you have a portion of your brain that doesn't do stuff, then you try and train it to start doing that thing, right? Because what we do, how we do things in our personality has to do with specific connections in your brain that make you who you are, hence your personality, right? So that is there all the time. We do a lot of work in that direction right now. We also know this stuff like latent memory. So if a woman is listening to classical music all the time and you start the child early with a piano, he plays better than the next person, right? Or you have stuff like, how do you explain you have a cat? It's never seen a snake before. Throw a snake and it will freak out. It has that latent memory and it's built into its genetic code that tells it, snake, dangerous. It doesn't know where the snake is, right? So it's all about how do we tap into these things that we transmit, you know, genetically to the next generation that tell them this is dangerous. How do we plug into that? How do we use that and neuroplasticity to try and push for slight differences in how we approach problems, solve problems, right? So it's still in its infancy. There are people that are doing wonderful stuff. Some of it is unethical, right? To be able to achieve what you're trying to do. Let's go to, say, the normal stuff we use it for. When we're treating somebody for, say, a type of anxiety, let's use Oga Kaide. Do you like snakes? So you don't like snakes, good. If I can see you in a very lovely kitchen there, right? And if I put one little snake in that room there, and you know that snake is there, your anxiety is going to go through the roof because you can't even see it.
I'll move out.
Yeah, exactly. You know it's somewhere there, but you can't see it. It's bugging you. But if I put you in a vat a transparent vat, and we can all watch you. And we train 1,000 snakes in there, right? And they're hissing, they're slithering over your body, and they're driving you nuts. Your anxiety is going to go up to the roof, but it gets to a point it can't go beyond that, and you'll plateau. And then after 6 hours, you're still in that vat with all those snakes, 1,000 snakes, you start getting bored. There's been a slight change in your brain. You know you've survived it. You know that you don't like one snake, but 1,000 snakes all over your body. After a week of that, one snake in your apartment, you couldn't be bothered. Has change occurred? Yes. Has the brain changed slightly? Yes. Has your tolerance for stuff or the way you deal with stuff changed? Yes. But it's so extreme a treatment that is not done all the time. But you can see what I'm trying to describe, right?
That's what's happening to people in Ukraine, actually, that they'll be showing you where shells landed, but they refuse to evacuate. And you see them walking around. Once they blow the siren, they hide. Once the thing is over, they
and
just
life will go on. And babies are born in that whole crap.
Yeah.
And babies
Kids are running around still.
Yeah. It's amazing what the brain can take. And
so does that mean that if you are scared of something, basically jump into 1,000 of it?
If that rocks your boat and you can stomach it, why not? You don't like some of the best speech givers in the world had the worst social anxiety you can think of. But they were like, and you know what, let me face this thing. And the more they did it, they got better at it. And then everybody's going like, Jesus, man, you're bloody good. But it came from fear.
That's true. Oga, you're a good motivation speaker. You won't make me not to call Oga Balasabo to tell him, say, and they come Nigeria tomorrow.
Want to face your fear.
Okay. Oga, I almost want to call Oga Balasabo to tell him, say, and they come Nigeria tomorrow to come to see.
But as he's saying that, I'm realizing that is that not part of how we were rebuilt in AFMS, that they take your greatest fears and then make you fix it every day, every weekend, continuously, till suddenly it just becomes a part of you.
Of course. It becomes your, that's how I was challenging Jide. Like, how do you know that's not who you, I mean, I don't remember you from before you went to school, but you can be sure that school definitely increased your tolerance for, human suffering, to put it mildly, so there is that.
Yeah, no, I strongly believe that FMS, increases grit. If you look at a lot of like ex-jams, there's just something different that whole 6 years had done to them.
Yeah. Okay, let's use you, for example. I love the work you're doing. I've been following you on Twitter, social media, so you're not doing the usual, let me just do what I was trained to do. No, you're going on the limb. You're going to try and see if you can create a company, create something, right? How many people succeed doing that? But you have that grit to say, what's the worst thing that can happen? I can always fall back on, But if this works out, tomorrow your kids will do nothing like what you did, and they'll be like, oh, Daddy was a genius. No, Daddy just simply had grit. Daddy was going to stick to it till the end.
Daddy lost his mind when he went to AFMS. That's actually
I appreciate the support. Thank you.
No, I'm serious. I really love the work you're doing, and it's just brilliant, man.
Yeah. Final question from me. This whole thing about generational trauma that is imprinted in the DNA, like the say for slavery, what is the science around it? Can you highlight more?
Personally, I think it's hogwash. I don't believe that just the last 200 years of slavery makes us less than. I think it's other stuff like redlining, institutional poverty. It's like Jim Crow, you know what I mean? Like trying to make sure that Black people were used as cheap labor after people lost their slaves down south. And in I think it's 12 to 15 states or so, including Memphis and all these places, the prison systems there, they don't pay you anything. They even pay you minimum wage. So it's still the same slavery to do the same build the road tracks and all that. So the whole work thing, I get it, but at the same time, we have to be honest about certain things. It's a rubbish science. There's no such thing as generational trauma with the imprint. There's generational trauma with what's in front of you. We are lucky as Africans, as Nigerians, we don't have the baggage they have.
That's true.
My grandfather was a slave. If I grew up, my dad was a doctor, my uncle was like it's what you're used to, your uncle, your neighbor. So you had that self-belief. You weren't called a nigger until you came out here. Or you call yourself a nigger because you felt like a nigger in Nigeria, but you didn't have any of these problems. So the generational trauma is more like in watching your dad clean shoes and being told you don't amount to anything, no matter what you do. I remember my first time in New York. I remember, I think I was in Madison Square Garden. The conference we had was right there. I didn't even know where it was until nighttime. I saw that the place looks familiar. Like, oh, okay, it's the Madison Square Garden, right? But I remember these two chaps that were rapping when I got out to my hotel room, and they when they finished, they were quite good, so I stopped to watch. And then when they finished, they were handing out their CD copies, And when I reached out to grab one of them, the guy held on. It's like, "Hey, sorry, man. I just so you come out of that hotel. Were you staying there?" I'm like, "Yeah." "Are you a rapper, man? Are you a rapper?" I'm like, "Of course not." So how do you, do you deal? Like, you mean like, do I do drugs? And I was like, no. It was like, and then how are you able to stay in that hotel? That was his question. And for me, that was a very, very heavy question because in his worldview, and I sat down